Well, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Jennifer Connell, and I'm joined today by Chris Brunone and Gina Grover. And today we're going to talk about some trends. Every year we conduct a trends webinar at the beginning of the year, but there's been a lot going on already. So we thought it was very important to kind of do a mid-year checkup, if you will, on what's going on in the workforce. So we thought we'd kind of have a little conversation, right, Chris, and Gina, about what we're seeing, the conversations we're having with our clients. And Chris, you do so much work with our own clients, but also with our own workforce. So why don't we just jump right into it and talk about some of the things that we hear going on. The one thing that I see happening all the time, and something we've been discussing for quite a while, is how the workforce, it's just become so elastic. And by elastic, it's not just in terms of what's happening, with the hybrid workforce that we've seen happen since the pandemic. It's become remote. We've seen companies that are kind of, I think the majority of them have landed on this hybrid workforce, but hybrid work structure. Most of them are going into the office now, 2-3 days a week, but also career-wise, employees now, they're no longer looking at themselves as one career over the course of their lifetime. They might have different careers, different roles. But I was wondering, Chris, if we could start with you, because I've seen this remote workforce really kind of change the way companies and employees are looking at the way they're kind of going to address their workforce over the way they're going to be planning things for the future. I was wondering if you could kind of give us a little bit of a lens into that.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a mystery. I don't know if I can embrace, Yogi Berra's yogiism of, that, predicting things are pretty challenging, especially about the future. But there are some things happening. In some of the work I've done, I've actually, read a while back and talked to somebody that said that we're all going to be going back to the offices by 2025, which is really fascinating. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, Cisco just announced, right? I think they have 75,000 employees, and during the pandemic, 35-40% were, remote, and I think they're going to push that up between remote and hybrid. It's going to be 80-85%. So yeah, I think it's here to stay. I think with all the uncertainty in business, I think with the focus on costs, the focus on AI and machine learning, all the modeling going on in the work, with workforce analytics right now. I think at the end of the day, we're going to see a combination of a little bit of on-site, hybrid, and remote, with this hybrid thing, I think, really emerging as something that's going to be the largest group.
Yeah, and it's certainly going to change, I think, the way that they're going to engage with their workforce too, right? That AI and ChatGPT, we hear about it all the time, but it's certainly going to change the way that they look towards their workforce, and how are they going to engage employees moving forward?
Yeah. Well, look, I think engaging, the employee or the colleague today is going to be challenging. As you think about it, there are so many things happening at the leadership level, at the management level, that are going to really press people to look at things differently. I don't know if you want me to talk about the challenge of the manager today in engaging employees and working with this, but you think about it, they have directives from the top of the organization, right? And then they also have to understand and relate to the employees. So they're kind of caught in the squeeze of it all, right? So they're having a challenge, and then you're going to have folks who are on-site, folks who are remote, folks who are hybrid, and so it's going to be a challenge. And I think we're going to really need to upskill our managers to be able to deal with this in a way that's going to make it more comfortable, and that they could relate and engage the colleague at a much deeper level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm certainly looking at that AI and ChatGPT as a way to, how can we make all of our jobs easier, right? I was recently looking at some research, and of course there's lots of research out there, but it all depends on what you want to look at. That I believe it was SHRM put out recently that the group that is that when they did some surveying on what group they think is going to be most impacted is HR by the AI and the ChatGPT, and that certainly could have a huge impact on mobility and our own audience in that respect, if that comes to fruition. So could be interesting.
Yeah, well, look, I think HR is taking a prominent role in looking at how to use technology, and there are all these visualization tools on doing recruiting and hiring kinds of people, and what jobs can be, done using that. So yeah, HR is going to be impacted, I think, pretty quickly and most profoundly, and it will be in a good way.
Okay. So another trend that we're seeing is employees have been looking to their employers in the past few years to help them build their resumes, if you will, which is kind of interesting, right? Who goes to their employer and says, help me make my resume better? But really what they're doing is they want their employers to help them upskill and build those skills. They want those opportunities. And I think in the past we want those opportunities to, be seen and be visible within the company, but it's really helping them to enhance their own skills, which is great. I think that's an engaged workforce.
Sure.
That's what that says to me. Can you speak a little bit to that? That we're seeing that market change a little bit as companies are kind of, I always use the words right sizing their workforce. But do you think that employees are going to be having those demands, let's just say, on those employers, if they can continue looking to their employers to kind of give them those skills moving forward, if that's the case?
Yeah, I look at it a slightly different way. Obviously things are changing, and the pendulum of power is shifting a little bit back to the employers, right? That we're noticing it. Yet at the same time, it's a both and, right? Because if we're bringing in colleagues and the jobs are shifting, there's an enormous amount that needs to be learned. And I think the ability to deal with change, the ability to upskill, is going to benefit both the employer and the employee. And so I think it's really important. I mean, our recent colleague engagement survey indicated any number of things around, yeah, sure, we want flexibility, but people want autonomy, right? I mean, they want some variety, they want to learn, they want to grow. And I think it's up to us to meet, employees halfway. I do think employees need to take responsibility and accountability to do things on their own, but I think we have to provide those tools, because as we look at what the workforce is going to be like, or what our leaders or managers are going to be doing, we need to be looking at potential and getting people in a queue to be able to grow them to take on, these roles that are dramatically changing daily. So I think it'll be a good thing, and I think we have to meet in the middle. I don't think it's a both and. I think it'll benefit both of us.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can necessarily turn the spigot off just because the market has changed a little bit in that direction. And I think there's just so much opportunity now, and now that we've gotten away from the pandemic, there's so much we've learned from. There's so much virtual opportunity to be able to upskill and reskill talent where you need it to be, and to continue to be agile as an organization, to be able to meet the needs of the organization and to fill those gaps, but in different ways. And to keep those employees engaged, because you don't know what the future is going to be, right?
Yeah, well, a couple of things, right? We don't know what engagement means in a lot of respects too, because their motivations are changing, their values are changing based on generation, where they come from. So we have to really stay close to them in that regard. But I read too, I think Gartner had a study on trends, and I think they had 9 items that they listed that were trends in the workforce. And one of them kind of piqued my interest. It was actually, I believe, the last one, that talked about the erosion of social skills, particularly of the Gen Zs and some millennials, and the impact that that's going to have. And I'm thinking, geez, that's, and I can give you a perfect example of someone who was a younger professional who first met me, I think it was in their 2nd week. And instead of saying, hi, Chris, how are you? I am such and such, they asked me what my title was and what I did around here. and I was like, okay, now what do I say? So, but in any case, yeah, that's an issue I think we're going to have to pay attention to, especially with the pandemic and everybody on, social, on social networks right now. We're going to be really needing to focus on what those social skills are going to be saying and doing, and how we're going to support people, because not everybody has them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where I do think mobility plays a big role in this, is that it does provide those skills and opportunities for employees moving forward. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So I don't want to spoil that for you, Gina, because I know we're going to be looking at that. And Gina, I'm going to bring you into this conversation. We haven't forgotten about you yet, but this is an evergreen trend. This has been going on for a while. I want to talk a little bit about some of the goals that companies have been developing for a while now. They've been incorporating more of those ESG goals of diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability, and wellness. There are shared values for companies and employees. Can you provide some examples of how these are important to employees? Are they going to continue to be trends moving forward in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me here. I've been doing some research on the topic of sustainability and inclusion and that, and really what I'm finding overall is employees want to work for companies that have the same values that they do. That's kind of a no-brainer. Every company has their DE&I initiatives, their policies, that type of thing, and they're expecting to see that throughout, every department in the company. So if somebody is looking to make a move, do something in the global mobility realm, they want to make sure that the DE&I policies are carried out throughout the entire process as well. And it's really easy. I mean, not really easy, but there are small steps that companies can take to make sure they're being inclusive and sustainable, really showing those values that are important to relocating employees. It can be something as, just looking at the language in your policy and make sure it's inclusive language, with pronouns, that type of thing. I mean, that's a $0 thing that companies can do. They can also kind of enhance their benefits and kind of point out what is a sustainable option when it comes to, perhaps moving their household goods, that type of thing, give them some options, put a little green leaf next to, buying furniture in their new location rather than shipping it across the country or across the world. So those are the things that relocating employees are looking for, and those are just some ideas that can help global mobility foster those beliefs and encourage people to, keep believing in those things that are important to them.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, would you mind if I also commented
Sure.
on that question, because it's something that's near and dear to our hearts internally as well. One of the areas that you mentioned around wellness, I think the issue of burnout's really real, right?
Absolutely.
Gina, I'm sure you would agree too. So, and that's, people who are mobile and going to another location, they're not separated from that.
Right.
And so we need to be paying attention to burnout. Is it workload? Is it their skill sets for managing? Is it, as Gina said, a mismatch with values, because people burn out if things aren't quite matching what they want, right? And then, burnout could come from boredom. So, we need to be paying attention to all these issues and making our values and vision and mission come alive by inspiring people who are our employees, and not just folks who are working and not mobile, but especially our mobile employees as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is something that I'm seeing happening with mobility managers, that they're struggling with, is their own burnout. Right. To be honest, is they're dealing with it, but with the employees that they move. Is last week I was actually in Canada facilitating some roundtables, and we did some speed networking sessions, and that was my topic, was talking about mental wellness. And they are finding that they are working with leadership to manage this hybrid workforce. And they have remote employees that they're working with, as well as the mobile employees, and they're trying to juggle these two ends of the pendulum there, if you will. And they're saying, well, if we have these remote employees that are being mobilized, they're working from anywhere, they're kind of on their own, and they're finding that they're burnt out and they're stressed. But how do we get them to access services and to utilize what the company can offer them, and the assistance? And in some regions of the world, they're not necessarily acceptable. They're not able to do that. And so they are looking at virtual services, and perhaps having people in the host location reach out to them and say, please, this is okay to do, and you should be doing it, and it's not going to have an impact on your career. We want you to be able to access these services. So it's very important.
And I think more and more of that will be acceptable as well. So, and that's a good trend if that continues.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So looking at other trends, the next one is shifting demographics. Boy, they're always shifting, right? And now we're looking at Gen Z that you were mentioning earlier, Chris. So shifting demographics among the early workforce reinforces this cohort as a highly mobile population. And we've always kind of looked at that emerging workforce as being the most mobile, right? So Gina, companies, they're always going to need to move people. We know that. And the younger workforce they continue to look at those opportunities as those, to reinforce that, and their own freedom and their own ability to be able to pursue personal as well as professional opportunities.
Right.
Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think if anyone has watched the news or been to an airport recently, they will definitely see that travel is back, right? Full airports are long lines, that type of thing. It's both pleasure and business travel are definitely on the climb. What we did learn from some research that I did is, again, talking about those Gen Zers, is about 64% of them are saying that business travel is a top or high priority for them this year. They are anxious to get out and meet face to face. And it kind of goes back to what Chris is talking about with hybrid. And I think employees and employers are seeing the value of being face to face. Nothing is going to replicate that. It's nice to have the convenience of working remotely, but there is, it's always nice to meet somebody face to face. And Gen Z is realizing that, and that's one of the main reasons they are doing their business travel is for those client meetings and having those face to face. With the Gen Zers too, they're taking advantage of that business travel and tacking on some personal travel during that time as well. Again, as you mentioned, Jen, they have the flexibility probably to take that time off and add a couple of days to their business trip. And about 88% of them, when they do go on business trips, they add a day or two before or after the business trip to take in some personal time. So it's an interesting trend. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always nice to do, right? I remember a few years ago reading an article, they called it bleisure, business with leisure, leisure term there.
Yeah, if you're going to be there, might as well take in the sights, right?
Yeah, well, they're smarter than a lot of us who are a little bit more tenured. We used to fly in, have our meetings, and fly back. But it sounds like the Gen Zers are a lot smarter than we are.
They learn from us, right?
Yes, blaze the trail.
Yeah, which speaks to the power they bring and the insight they bring. I think it's healthier to do that as well.
Yeah, good for them. Hopefully they're bringing those dollars with them to generate some the economy a little bit. Okay, and so Chris, despite the cooling of the war for talent, employees are still resisting that return to office. What do you think about that? I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with our clients, and they've talked a lot about their own employees. I don't know. I've been on the road. I know earlier I mentioned that most companies, they've really landed on this 2 to 3 days in the office. I'm on the road, and the commute is still like as bad, if not worse, than it ever was. So I don't know if it's not 2/3 of what it was. It's 100%, if not more. But all the research points to a hybrid workforce, right? And a hybrid work structure. How can companies ease that transition back to work for their employees, do you think?
Well, I don't know if it's ease. I mean, some are basically telling their folks to come back, and that's in many cases not working. But in some cases are. I mean, there are 2 folks who I ran into just last week who had dictated to them they have to be commuting into New York 4 days. And I said, are you actually going in 4 days? And they're commuting about an hour and a half from down the shore in New Jersey. And they said, yeah, I have to go in. I don't advise that, right? Certainly over the long haul. Look, I think the pandemic taught us that this virtual thing does work. Collaborative tools, it does work. We can leverage it purposefully. We're getting better and better at it. But at the end of the day, we're also social beings. And I think we have a responsibility as leaders in companies to give a rationale for coming back. And so again, I think it's important for the company to really highlight why it's important to come back. I think it's important for folks to make good use of that time. People don't want to just sit in their cube all day because at the end of the day, if you're traveling an hour and you're burning gasoline or petroleum, you look at the cost of that and you begin to take a look at, geez, what is this costing me to come in and sit by myself?
Yeah.
So, the reality is hybrid is going to continue to work. I think it's going to be beneficial. I think culture is going to be dramatically impacted, but maybe in a good way. We're going to get used to what culture really means in the future, and it's going to elevate the bar for what our mission is, what our vision of success is, what our values really mean, and how we can really meet employees halfway to make it purposeful. Because we're social, we have to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
I know from my own personal experience, I see colleagues connecting like they never have before, and they continue to do so. But if you're in 1 or 2 days, those things could work. But 3 days, I think will continue to 3 and 4 days. I don't know if 4 or 5 days will come to pass.
Right. Yeah.
But 2 or 3 days, I think, does make sense. And I think it'll benefit everyone.
Yeah, no, I think those are great points. And I remember, boy, I don't know how many years ago, I don't want to date myself, but I remember companies were trying to entice employees just to come work for them by putting these pool tables in their offices.
Right.
And I remember slides. They had slides going from the second floor to the first floor. Can't imagine who insured their offices, but but all these fancy things. And now it's kind of, they said, that's not working for us anymore. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Gina, about when we're talking about values and companies and employees are looking for companies whose values align with their own. And you were just talking about it, Chris, that they want that connection and finding that message that we want, that they have to make it meaningful for employees. And I think about that mental wellness aspect. And one of the 5 key essentials that even the US Surgeon General has put out there is employees are looking for purpose, and they want the employer to tell them what they're bringing to the company. They want to understand why it's important to them, why they're important to the company, and being able to understand that message. So being able to give them that message, tell them why they're important to the company, what their purpose for being there is, and understanding why we want you to be in the office is very important, and making it meaningful to the entire workforce is I think that's going to drive them. The companies that I've spoken with, when they've been able to give them that message, is they tell them what days they need them to be in the office, but they're trying to make it so that everybody's in the office the same days to drive that connection with each other.
Yeah. Well, look, I think there are 2 sides to this, right? There's the company's issues, right? Not only do you have office space, which, I think doesn't really get you anywhere. But look, we're all going through massive transformation right now, and industries are changing, industries are commoditizing, technology is impacting us, and work needs to be done. I know one of the teams in our company that's pretty dispersed, came in together and worked on several major issues for 2 days and got an enormous amount of work done. And they're actually really good working virtually together, but they found coming together and really going face to face helped them solve these challenges and accelerated their way to innovate out of some of the mess that was created. So, I think coming together is purposeful for a lot of reasons. Working together, it's going to help us innovate more quickly, but it shouldn't discount the fact that we know how to work virtually. The other thing is, I think employees, they want mastery, they want meaning, they want autonomy, they want to be able to relate to others, they want variety, they want flexibility, and they want to learn, they want to grow. And I think all those are on the table, because if we can respond and support that, it's going to benefit the organization as well as the colleague and the employee.
Well said. Thank you. Okay. So the next one, I'm going to go back to you again, Chris, is
Gina, if you want to jump in at any time, please
I
do.
will. I will.
Just, like I said, I didn't know what to expect here, so.
And by the way, can I point out one observation where we keep talking about hybrid work structures? I love how our webinar is a hybrid work structure.
Oh, wow.
So Gina, thank you for making this a hybrid webinar.
Please.
So employers require mobility to develop leadership and support growth. I mean, this almost we should have led the webinar with this one, right? Chris, this one's for you, because you conduct so many leadership. I mean, this is the heart and soul of really what I consider you do, is you bring a lot of leadership training to our own organization, but you bring it to our clients as well. How exactly? I mean, I kind of know the answer to this because you've done this for me personally so many times, but Can
Well, you can answer it. So
I know. Is this a quiz? Is this a pop quiz? Oh, you have to give this to Gina. How does mobility support this effort? How does mobility support growth for companies?
look, at the end of the day, we talked about the Gen Zers, you know, wanting a business travel, and others, you know, needing to go somewhere else to do a job. Sure, mobility throws you into another world, right? It throws you into a contextual world, a cultural difference potentially, potentially a new job. I mean, you think about all that does to stretch you. And leadership is about stretching our skill set so that we can deal with change, have a better understanding of how to innovate. And so mobility is a perfect vehicle for stretching someone and creating learning. Certainly, it also makes you feel a little bit incompetent at first because everyone struggles with a new environment. I know, you know, you have relocated. I've certainly relocated and found myself in a situation where there are a number of things that you have to adapt to. And so becoming adaptive, becoming proactive, learning, developing new relationships, understanding the organization and some of the political influences. Those are all leadership qualities and capabilities. And so you're thrust into that with mobility in a lot of different ways. And I think it's a perfect primer for accelerating anybody's leadership skill set. And typically you're also part of a team, and you know, leadership is with a little L as much as it is with a big L. And so you're forced to create the expertise and create your value. So I just think it's a perfect vehicle for strengthening the capability and capacity of leaders.
Yeah, that's great. Gina, any thoughts on that one? I mean, that's such a great response. How do you think mobility supports leadership skills?
Well, yeah, it fosters, you know, I think being put into a situation that you're not familiar with, you know, adapting to a new culture, that type of thing. It really helps people define, you know, and realize how confident or competent they actually are. It really boosts their confidence. Like, you know, it's daunting to think about, you know, living in a different country, but once they start to see that they can adapt and thrive, it really helps build their confidence, which is obviously something that you want in a good leader.
Right. Yeah. I mean, can you think of a leader who has never had to overcome change, right? Yeah. And coming out of the pandemic, I read a study that the one thing that CEOs wanted the most was to build a resilient workforce. And that was one of the skills that they found. One of the top 3 skills that they were looking for was somebody who had been through some sort of overcome some kind of change, and mobility was one of the key factors in that. So
yeah, mobility is a magnifier and an accelerator, right? I think today we're dealing with change, and you know, we normally talked about change as kind of the static kind of roller coaster, when in fact there are 100 roller coasters that we're overlaying on people. And so, you know, look, mobility it forces you to adapt to change in ways that will make you resilient. And so I think it's a great way to accomplish that.
Okay. So I think we're coming down to the end. I mean, you know, the last trend is really, I was going to conclude with this, and I'll let you both weigh in on it. But I think it's really comes down to organizational priorities are going to continue to shape mobility. And with that, I was just going to comment on the fact that in advisory services, Gina and the group that we work with, we're working with clients all the time on the number and breadth of policies and programs that we're seeing them develop. You know, we've seen the number of tiers in programs just continue to increase, but more so is the number and types of programs. So companies, you know, that over time they've had very specific projects that they've wanted to address. So as a result, they might have a very specific rotational program that they've wanted to develop, or a commuter program that they've wanted to develop. And so as a result, they have many, many types of programs or flexible programs. And I know, Gina, you've been working with a number of clients on those types of policies. So as a result, you know, as companies start to become, you know, pivot and change the direction of their company, they're going to need more programs in order to address those. And I think it's a very exciting time to be in mobility. Any comments from either of you?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add to that. You know, we're seeing a lot of companies talk more about domestic temporary assignments to get that, experience to their relocating employees, that they're open to moving somewhere else, but they want to know that they can come back home after a couple of years, and they want that support too. So we are seeing, more chatter, if you will, about domestic short-term assignments, for sure. Something else that we're seeing is companies, with the rise of technology, which will just continue to keep rising, with AI and ChatGPT, all that kind of stuff, is they're having to start to hire a different kind of employee than perhaps they ever had before. Perhaps, they were manufacturing, and those were the kinds of employees that they were looking for. So they had a set of policies for those employees that were competitive with other people that were trying to attract that talent. But now they're trying to attract, high tech engineers, that type of thing, and the policies that they have for their manufacturing employees don't necessarily match what somebody in the high-tech sector would be looking for when they're, comparing offers from different companies, that type of thing. So companies are realizing that, maybe we need to have another set of policies for this employee group than we do, for this employee group. So that's kind of an interesting take on things too. And that all ties back to flexibility.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Great, thank you. So it's a wild time in mobility.
It's a wild time, and I think the leadership skills that are needed in mobility is, and even within companies, is how do you best connect with all these different types of employees? How do you understand their needs and, match those to the needs of the organization? And how do we inspire people to want to do this? And it's a tall challenge because there's a lot of confluence of issues going on right now. But I think mobility is a place where there's excitement, there's variety, there's learning, and I think those things are going to stay really attractive to the very best talent and employees.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you both. This is a great conversation, and I think it was a much needed conversation because there is so much going on in our world, both with HR and mobility. It was definitely well worth discussing mid-year what the trends are, and I think by the end of the year we're going to see things shift again. To be honest,
we're going to have to do another one of these at the end of the year, right?
Yeah, or maybe even monthly, depending on how things move.
That's a lot of change. That's a lot of change, Chris. I don't know if I can keep up. But I'll be here.
Okay. We'll do. We'll be here too if you want to bring us back. So.
Okay, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for
having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.